I'd like to welcome all of you to the Sports Summit called Creating a Culture of Inclusion. Today is a fantastic conversation. It's all about how do we make sure that people have positive experiences in sport. And when you think of inclusion, it is one of those topics that there's tremendous awareness and there's people doing great things, but there's also a lot of people that are stuck. They want to do the right thing, they're not sure what to do. So today in the room, we have athletes, we have coaches, we have sport organization leaders, community leaders, government, basically all key stakeholders that can make a huge difference in regards to inclusion.
The ultimate impact that we're after here is that every single Canadian of any ability has full, unrestricted access to sport, recreation and physical activity. They're provided with the necessary tools and resources to make sure that every experience that they have is meaningful and they can achieve their full potential in those experiences.
What excites me about today is seeing more and more different faces who are having this conversation around inclusion. It's fantastic when partners who are naturally in the space are collaborating. But as we see more and more organizations that want to make change in this space, coming to the table, having a discussion, asking the tough questions about what they can do, that's what excites me.
We're all doing such good work, but the opportunity to come together to collaborate and create some alignment between what we're doing is what's going to have the ultimate impact at the end of the day.
Where we are today is a big leap from where we were a decade ago. And if you think about how exciting the conversation is going to be a decade from now, stay focused, stay excited, stay positive, because we are making change.
I saw a stat that Marcia sent me last week that got me thinking as a dad. I've got two girls, 10-year-old and 6-year-old. And this was the stat. Only 26% of children with physical disabilities are participating in sport. Only 26%. And that compares to 75% of able-bodied children. So that's a rough stat, right? We have a belief at the Ottawa Sport Council that education is what others try to do to you, and learning is what you do for yourself. We are here to help you learn today. If you're familiar with Carol Dweck's work, I see there's educators in the room as well, really operating from a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. You know, the growth mindset looks at every situation and says, what a great opportunity. And the fixed mindset says, well, that's going to be a challenge because it's never been done. The growth mindset loves feedback. The fixed mindset defends feedback. So let's try to operate from a growth mindset standpoint. And the words we use matter. So let's try to find a way forward and really stick to that growth mindset. I don't know if you saw the video, but I watched this with my girls last night. What an inspiring story. Who got to watch the video? Anybody watch the video in the pre-work? I would encourage you, go back to that email. It is a phenomenal, phenomenal little video. And I'm going to leave it there. I'm not even going to talk about it today. So that's my teaser. That's your post-work. Go watch this video. It's very good. I was a tennis director in New Brunswick. I was 18 years old, and Peter Cameron was at our tennis club. And Peter Cameron had just won the Nationals for wheelchair tennis. Went to the first Olympics for wheelchair tennis. And when I look back now, tennis was the easiest part for Peter. It was everything around tennis that was difficult. He'd roll into our tennis club, we didn't even have pave. It was gravel. He'd go to the bathroom, it was 100 meters past it, and he had to go around trees and bushes and everything else. And what Peter, this was 89, 90, so obviously we've made progress, but I remember these days, and I would hit with Peter, he was my hitting partner, I was a junior. And it was never about the tennis, it was never about the 4 hours he was putting in a day. It was about all the infrastructure around it that made it difficult. So it's amazing how it comes back full circle that here I am, I guess 20 years later now, and hopefully I can have more impact, and really looking forward to this today as well. This was the quote that I said, if you're wondering. Joy Ito is very interesting. I got to meet Joy at a TED conference in Vancouver. Joy is the executive director of MIT Labs. That's a pretty good sandbox he's playing in. $20 billion endowment fund. Every single person that reports to Joy has 2 PhDs. Joy has no university degree. He's the first person at Higher Learning to be given the keys to such a sandbox. And that's how he started his TED Talk. Education is what people do to you, and learning is what you do for yourself. Because he said if people come to MIT, what they learn in year 1 is probably obsolete by year 3 if they're in computer engineering. So my job is to help them learn. So again, that's the inspiration for learning versus education. What does success look like today? It's very simple. That we leave here inspired, invigorated to do more. That we leave with, I say 2 ideas, but if you all left with 1, it was worth your time. Because if you try to do 10 things, we know what's going to happen, nothing's going to happen. And obviously, to build your network. So OSC 2018, okay? So if you want to tweet, if you want to post something on LinkedIn, on Facebook, have at it, right? This is a movement. We need to make sure that the movement is much stronger than what's happening in this room here today. And today would not happen. This is honestly a true collaboration. I look at the banners, I see Awesome Ottawa. I see Ability Center and Ottawa Sport Council, and then all of you in here, obviously today. So this is truly a collaboration. And with that said, I think, I'm looking at everybody's eyes, I can see the energy, you're ready to go. Stuart, the question is, are you ready to go though? That's the main question. You ready? Yeah, let's go. All right. So Stuart McReynolds.
I'm really excited to be able to share some of my personal experiences working within inclusion, Lateral Ability Centre Durham, and talk about inclusion as a way to be creative and look at it as a method not only to support inclusion of persons with disabilities, but look at it as a method to create mass participation within your sport and recreation organisations. So when we talk about inclusion, let's look at some of the bigger issues about why inclusion is important, not just for people with disabilities, but for the population as a whole. And by population as a whole, I mean children, youth, adults, and seniors. And my presentation today is going to focus a little bit more towards children, youth, and towards people with disabilities, but then start to talk about more inclusion as a whole and why it's important for everyone. So we know, everyone in this room, I'm sure, is aware that we've got a massive physical inactivity crisis. Boys under the age of 18, only 13% of boys under the age of 18 are meeting the 60 minutes daily physical activity requirements in Canada. Girls, in comparison, only 6% of girls are meeting those requirements. So that's within Canada. You can see the stark contrast of the amounts, the sheer number of our population that aren't meeting the basic daily physical activity requirements. So we can see at the top in the pictures there, we've got a group of students that are in front of a TV. So we talk about the increase in screen time. The increase of technology is limiting our children's ability to engage with the environment around them, develop the specific skills they need to be physically literate and to engage in physical activity. What we want is to look at the pictures at the bottom where we've got pictures of children smiling and participating in a range of different activities. When we look at what's being taken away from our children, building from the previous slide, we've got a great picture of a playground, we have a picture of a house with a street light on, and we have a picture of children walking to school. The trouble is with those 3 pictures, and it relates to the 4th picture there of a skeleton of a dinosaur, is that these are becoming prehistoric. Thankfully, we have fantastic partners in the room like Jumpstart who are committed to ensuring that we can bring back play, especially with the Accessible Playground initiative that they have on at the moment. But essentially, we've taken away free play. We're worried about children getting injured. We're worried about them falling off. We're taking away every element of risk from our children, and even more so for children with disabilities. Active transportation. Many kids aren't walking to school, whether that be through the increase of traffic, whether it be through parents and us wrapping our children in cotton wool and not letting them do that, whether it be a child with disability that has no means to be able to engage in active transport. They can't wheel to school because we put barriers up for them to be able to do so. And then who remembers growing up, come home when the street lights come on? How many of us do that now with our children? That's becoming redundant. Our parents are less likely now, and families and caregivers are less likely to say that because, again, the thoughts of the stranger danger that we're going now. And we're limiting those opportunities for all of our children and youth. And just to put it in perspective, the average amount of steps in terms of active transportation for a student to and from school is around 2,000. So immediately we're taking 2,000 steps away from our children every day. It's not just an issue in Canada. These are some stats from the UK. I do tend to use a lot of the UK stats just because they've got such a wealth of research. Again, we're generating a lot more research in Canada, but what's very interesting about the UK is they're just coming off the back of a very, very successful London 2012 Games, of which there was millions invested into legacy initiatives. So when you think about the stats I'm presenting here, think about that's already had an investment of money. So money is a huge component of what we've got to work towards in terms of investing in supporting inclusion and physical activity, but it's not the only piece. It's that cultural mindset and how we can work together to provide those opportunities. So a British study of people with physical disabilities found that 72.1% of people with disabilities do not participate in any sport or physical activity. 72.1%. Participation in sport or physical activity is significantly lower in all age groups when comparing those with versus without a disability. And of the 9.4 million individuals with disability in the UK, only 17.8% have access to sport. So I did say that these slides were going to be grim, but what I want to think about is the potential, the opportunity. When you look at those stats and you look at 72.1%, and I would argue that it's very similar, if not worse, in Canada, think about what we can do if we come together to support inclusion. Think about the impact that we can have if we work to provide an opportunity for everyone of any ability to engage in physical activity. In Canada, we have 5 million Canadians that live with a disability. 3.7% of those are children under the age of 14. Among Canadian children without disabilities, 75 participate in some form of organised sport. Among children with disabilities, sport participation rates are as low as 26%, and I believe Julian mentioned that earlier. So again, we've got a big role to contribute to increasing that. We, as a country, as a society, as a community, are not doing our job. We need to do more. We need to work together to support the inclusion of all children with all abilities in programming, in health, in recreation, in school, in sport. We can't keep rattling off these statistics and not do anything about it. And I know there's a lot of people in this room today, and it's really exciting that we can continue to generate some momentum, but we really need to influence the broader community. We really need to showcase how inclusion can benefit every individual in our society. So this is our challenge, 26%. Where are we going to get to from today onwards? When you look at the societal impact, physical activity is associated with a reduced risk of over 25 chronic conditions, including heart disease, stroke, hypertension, and type 2 diabetes. We keep talking about what's the magic pill. We go to our doctors, we get prescribed medication. What's the magic pill for health and wellness? It's physical activity. And there's a lot of research that actually backs it up. So why aren't we supporting it more for people of all abilities? Physical activity costs Canadian taxpayers nearly $7 billion per year. For those of us that work in the sport system, think about what $1 billion would do in terms of investing in sport and rec in this country. It would be a game changer. But still, we let it go on. $7 billion a year for physical activity. And worldwide, physical inactivity is estimated to cause 3.2 million deaths per year. Being inactive kills people. Could it get any more stark than that? When we look at schools, and schools is a big focus, and me personally in my career, I've got a big focus on the school system because every single person, every single child goes through the education system at some point in their life. So if we can target that and start to generate some change, in my opinion, we can create some momentum that we can then take into our communities and support those classroom to community transitions. So recent studies, and again, this is from the UK, where there was significant investment into physical education post-London 2012, found that 51% of children do not enjoy taking part in physical education classes. I would hazard a guess that out of that 51%, it's because we as practitioners are not providing the right opportunities for those children. We are not providing those activity variations that could get them engaged and support their meaningful participation. 70% want to play more sport. The majority of children with disabilities want to do more, but we're not providing them with those opportunities. 64% said they would prefer to take part in sport and physical activity with a mix of people with and without disabilities. And that goes towards that whole notion of inclusion. The majority of children with disabilities want the opportunity to participate alongside their able-bodied peers. And 60% noted that either a lack of awareness of opportunities or a lack of available opportunities prevents them from taking part in sport and physical activity. That's 60% that we are in control of in this room. Awareness, how we promote opportunities, how we work with each other to showcase what opportunities exist for children with disabilities to engage in sport, recreation, physical activity. Available opportunities, how we are providing those accommodations to ensure that children with disabilities can participate in our programs, they can access our facilities, and we can support that meaningful participation. So again, pretty stark statistics, But what gets me excited about these is the potential for the impact that we can all have. After school, only 10% of able-bodied children never get exercise after school. In comparison, 38% of Canadian children with a disability never get exercise after school. So again, we can see that the comparison what's happening in the classroom is the same as what's happening in the community and at home as well. Opportunities don't exist. So that's our challenge. How do we create these opportunities? How do we focus on inclusion to support the integration and inclusion of children and youth and adults and seniors of all abilities in our programs, in our facilities? Why should we care? The benefits of physical activity, everyone knows, are universal for all children, but they're more prevalent for children with disabilities. So benefits specifically of physical activity for children with disabilities, it promotes inclusion, optimizes physical functioning, and enhances overall well-being. And I would also argue there's a couple of more there where we talk about the mental health of our children. We talk about the psychosocial impacts. So being in an environment where a child can engage in physical activity has so many reciprocal benefits. Some of the difficulties in our experience for physical activity for children with disabilities, they are more restricted in participation. It might be disability specific, or it might be that us as a sector aren't providing enough variations or programs to include children with disabilities. Lower levels of fitness and higher levels of obesity than peers without disabilities. So again, it goes back to that sedentary lifestyle and our challenge to try and eradicate that. At the Ability Centre, when we talk about disability, we really prescribe to the social model of disability. And essentially what that identifies is systemic barriers, negative attitudes and exclusion by society, either purposefully or inadvertently, as a main contributory factor in disabling people. We build these fantastic buildings, fantastic playgrounds that people with disabilities can't access. We have these fantastic gyms and fantastic equipment that people with disabilities can't use. So as a society, we are not thinking about every member of our society and the build of facilities, the construction of programs, and that's something that we really need to fix. So what we try and do at the Ability Centre and with our partners is break down those societal barriers. We look at the abilities of every individual and work towards helping that individual realise their full potential. When we talk about integration and inclusion, there's many different debates, and I'm sure I'm going to have some fantastic conversations this afternoon about integration and inclusion. And for us, what we want to work towards is full inclusion. When we look at integration, we're looking at one part added to the whole. We're looking at a coaching plan, a session plan, a lesson plan that's designed for the mainstream able-bodied population. Then we'll make an adaptation for this type of student. We'll make a modification for this type of student. So we're having that individual added or squeezed in some fashion to that lesson plan. What we want to work with and what we work with at the Ability Centre is everyone as part of the whole, full inclusion. Who is likely to attend the session? How can we include every single individual, regardless of ability, to be able to participate fully in the programs and sessions that we run? And inclusion, our definition, and we use the Active Living Alliance definition of inclusion, is to encourage people of all abilities to engage in meaningful participation together in an environment which fosters a sense of belongingness and autonomy. So there's multiple factors that make up that definition there, but all abilities, not just people with disabilities. Meaningful participation, meaningful to that individual. Belongingness and autonomy, not just about running around and getting sweaty. How are we supporting that psychosocial development? Building positive relationships. When we look at the inclusion hierarchy, we can see here that we've got different levels of inclusion. And what we want to work towards essentially is providing that top level of fully inclusive physical activity. What we've got the bottom two sections there is informed observer of passive role, and that is some of the horror stories that we continue to hear today. You've got a disability, great. You can be the timekeeper. You can be the referee sitting on the sideline. That's great. Exactly. Yeah, you can be the goalie that's stationary in a soccer net or a hockey net. Not acceptable. We need to work up towards, and in some cases, again, it might be that for the child's benefit, they might need to participate in a separate activity if it's disability specific. But essentially what we really want to work towards is that full inclusive physical activity, where every single child is participating to their full ability and full potential in the same environment as everyone else. So just going back to the Ability Centre and a bit of why I'm here today, the Ability Centre is a very special place. I've been fortunate to be there for 2 years, but we are now entering into our 6th year of operation. The whole facility was the concept and brainchild of Jim Flaherty and Christine Elliott. And they wanted to create a place that, number one, had no physical barriers in terms of infrastructure, but then also the development of programs that are fully inclusive. So it really is a microcosm of society where anyone of any ability can come, participate in sports, recreation, health and wellness, education, life skills and research in a fully inclusive environment. Some of the programs that we run, we have senior programs, stroke recovery, cardiac rehab, dancing with Parkinson's. We have child and youth programs. We have parasport specific programs. We have programs run in partnership with Grandview Children's Centre. We have a high performance student athlete academy, which is the world's first that integrates high performance Special Olympic athletes with para athletes, with able-bodied athletes, all in the same space at the same time with the same supports and services. And we have a life skills program as well. And for us, I mean, this is what we pride ourselves most on. We've got a world-class facility, but really what really brings us to life is the programs and what happens inside those 4 walls. And it's been learning. It's been a big learning curve. I think the idea was fantastic at the start in terms of building a facility, but when our doors opened, it was a case of, what the hell do we do now? Great, we've got this big mission and mandate. How the hell do we make this work? How the hell do we provide this inclusion? So 6 years of learning, of researching and trying. And I think what that has bred is a philosophy of creativity. And that's what's exciting about inclusion for me. It enables you to be innovative in your approaches, enables you to be creative in your approaches. And I'm delighted to say now, after 6 years, we've been able to take some of our programs on the road provincially and nationally as well. For us as well, when we go back to that social model of disability, what we're really trying to achieve is removing those barriers in our society and communities to participation. This is a really interesting diagram we have here. So on the left-hand side, we have 3 participants standing on 3 equal side boxes, peering over a wooden fence to watch a baseball game. So that's equality. Everyone's got the same tools and resources to participate in that activity, although you can see that there's no equity in that. So then we look at the concept of equity, and in the second picture in the middle, we have the shorter individual having 2 boxes, the middle individual in the middle having 1 box, and the adult on the end, so everyone's at the same viewpoint. So it's great, but the barrier still exists. So why don't we actually look at what's causing the issue in the first place and move it? Get rid of that old wooden fence and allow everyone to participate on their own terms. Get rid of that barrier that's preventing that full participation and supporting that inequality. By variations, what we mean by that is that if you can provide 2 or 3 different ways for any child or any participant to participate in activity, you are supporting that athlete to engage, that participant to engage on their own terms. And by the very notion of that, you're providing inclusion. Versus adaptations where you've got a lesson plan and you've got 5 adaptations down the side to squeeze people with disabilities in, and not just people with disabilities. You might have that able-bodied child who has got a negative attitude towards running around or becoming physically active. They don't want to get sweaty. They don't want to be perceived as being weak among their peers participating in contemporary sport. But let's say we had a game of basketball and we gave every participant 3 different options on how they want to choose to participate in that sport. You can do it sitting down shooting hoops. You can do it walking. You can do it running. Not only are you providing support to include people of all abilities, but you're meeting participants where they're at. You might have a child that does not want to get engaged in basketball because they see it as being aggressive and running around and getting sweaty. But if that child has an opportunity to participate in that game on their terms, sitting down, where they can develop the motivation, confidence and competence, then they might progress to walking. Now, I might progress to running. So that's where we really invest a lot of our time, is providing those variations to support the participation of anyone of any ability. We look at our adult population. Me as a rugby player, and I'm going to show an example a bit later on, I can't play anymore. I've got compressed nerves in my neck and I struggle to tell hot and cold water, and I get told off by my children, my wife, when I'm bringing them warm cups of water to drink. So I can't play rugby. But if we had a variation within that game, which we'll talk about in terms of mixed ability rugby, where if I can wear some yellow shorts, I can play in a full contact game but not take contact. So again, that notion of inclusion, where when we start to look at variations, we can start to really look at inclusion as a method to increase mass participation in our clubs, in our sports, in our organisations, versus adaptations where we're constantly up against it, trying to squeeze people in and providing additional work. Just going to show you a short video here, and what I want you to look at when we're looking at this video is not just the individual disability, but I want you to observe the environment around that child.
Hey. Hey.
I pick up a broken comb, run it through my thin gray hair. Though I don't have any plans tonight, I'm not going anywhere. Well, I should have seen this coming.
Come on.
Don't know why I'm surprised.
When the best of us steps up, our nation stands a little taller. We all play for Canada.
So what really excites me about when I see that video is the inclusion of the child with disability is fantastic, and that's great. It's those 6 or 7 children around that individual that are now participating in that sport on their own terms, being creative and creating different variation that supports their full participation alongside the full participation of that child with a disability. How many of us as practitioners, when we coach basketball or rugby or soccer, just go back to the traditional games? You have a ball, you run around, that's it. How many times in our practice do we give the opportunity for children to think creatively? This is what we're going to do, this is objective, go away and do. Here's the equipment that you can use. And just by providing that creativity option for those children to develop how they want to engage, we're being inclusive. And that's what really excites me about that video. And what I really saw there was creativity and innovation. Who knew you could play basketball using a trolley or a tricycle or a bicycle? Fantastic. Again, supports that innovation, that inclusion really brings. Meaningful participation. Every single child, including that child with disability, was participating meaningfully and to their full potential. And another key piece about that is the development of physical literacy. And this is a big piece for us in that when you look at providing different options and variety of sports for children of all abilities, we're developing that whole concept of physical literacy. When you provide non-traditional sports and games for individuals, you enable them to develop the movement, the confidence, and the confidence to enjoy that situation and be active for life. What I want to showcase from this video, if we can get it up, is the whole concept of mass participation. And it goes back to my personal example of being a rugby player and not being able to play that sport, but now because there's variations being brought into the sport, I can continue to play.
Parece mentira, igual cuando vas a arbitrar tu primer partido, sientes y dices, bueno, ¿qué tendré que hacer algo especial? ¿Qué va? Lo único que haces es arbitrar un partido de rugby. No hay diferencias entre un jugador con diferentes capacidades a un jugador con otras capacidades. Los skills, el rugby es total. Es total.
You feel the power within them when you see them on the pitch, and some of them can hardly walk. and they still want to be part of something, and that's something to look up to.
Muchas cosas que el rugby, lo que vos aplicás del respeto lo llevas en la vida misma.
Me encanta el contacto, es lo mejor que sé hacer.
What we have to do is take it right back to where it started from, a guy wanting to play rugby with able-bodied players.
Il discorso di poter stare con della gente che non ti giudica, ma che anzi ha bisogno di te.
Digo, mira, el rugby no hace amigos, hace hermanos. En el rugby hace hermanos.
Tanto los jugadores, entrenadores, coaches, organizadores, directivos me han demostrado que esto puede seguir adelante de una manera que no haya ninguna diferencia entre un inclusivo y rugby total.
Es un futuro para poder remover muchísimas conciencias, poder abrir muchísimas mentes y poder cambiar el mundo.
What we can see from that video again is a whole concept of providing inclusion supports mass participation. What we saw in that video was 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds, all playing in the same space, in the same time, alongside people with disabilities. That's what we're working to achieve. And that is such, and of course I'm biased, being rugby, but what a great initiative from a sport in order to stimulate mass participation within their sport. And when you talk about what mass participation brings, it not only supports the inclusion of everyone in your programs that you run at your organizations or your clubs or your recreation institutions, but it also supports participation of a whole range of the community that you're not reaching. There might be a family member of a father or a mother with a disability that now they can join that club and all play together. What you saw there was fathers playing with sons, brothers playing with brothers. And you think about the economic impact. You think if you're a traditional rugby club and you do traditional rugby, and then you increase your program offerings to be more inclusive and provide mixability, you think about the number of registrations that you're going to then stimulate. You think about that influx of revenue to your club because now you're providing opportunities for mass participation within your club. You think about all those individuals that were smiling and participating in meaningful participation that probably had a knee injury or a hip replacement or a shoulder injury that were told they would never play rugby again. And there they are, representing the country in an international tournament. Not just people with disabilities, everyone in our population. And that's really a model that we aim to strive towards as well, and look at those different variations that support those mass participation through inclusion. One other aspect I really want to touch on, and I'm getting close to wrapping up here, is the whole concept of partnership and why inclusion. And I would say today there are more organisations and partners working in the sphere of inclusion than there ever has been before. There are some phenomenal partnership, and there is such strength in partnership. And when I look around the room today, the amount of different organisations in this room, some of which are working together currently, and some of which aren't. And what I really want to encourage today is how can we take the momentum for today's discussion and start to develop those partnerships that can start to support the implementation of inclusion so that we can include people of all abilities in our sport and recreation programs. Just highlight a few there. And when we talk about partnership, it's not just program partners. We look at partners such as Canadian Tire Jumpstart that are supporting the programs, but also funding opportunities. We have organisations that provide professional development opportunities and inclusion, program support. So there are a wealth of individuals and organisations out there that haven't traditionally been there that can support us as we aim to achieve our objective of being fully inclusive. So today's conversation, we've known that inclusion supports mass participation. It has such significant health and social benefits for every individual, regardless if you have a disability or not. It has a massive economic stimulus if you look at variations and look at that whole concept of how inclusion can support mass participation. So we ask why inclusion, and I ask everyone in the room today, why not? Thanks everyone, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
We're going to bring in Marco from the Jumpstart Canadian Tire Foundation that we all know are doing great work.
Good morning. So I want to pick up on a few themes that Stuart touched on in his presentation. Partnership and collaboration. I judge the success of these get-togethers by the number of people I haven't met before, because it means we're starting to have conversations with people who haven't been advocating for these types of changes for a long time. The other one is a question, why not? That's what prompted a group of executive leaders and the daughter of the founder of Canadian Tire, Martha Billis, to ask, how can we get more kids involved in sport and recreation back in 2005? And they started with the premise that not all kids can afford to play sports or participate in physical activity or recreation programs. So how do we help them overcome that particular barrier? And it was with that notion that Canadian Tire Jumpstart Charities was founded in 2005. Some of you may not know this, but Canadian Tire Corporation is more than just the big red triangle Canadian Tire retail stores that dot the country. There are 500 of those stores across Canada, and every single one of those dealers raises money in support of the work that we do. But there are 1,300 other retail locations. Sport Check, National Sports, Pro Hockey Life, Sport Expert in Quebec, Marks, our gas bars, our real estate investment trust, the Canadian Tire Financial Services, tens of thousands of employees, 1,800 retail locations, engaging with hundreds of thousands of Canadians every year in support of the work that we do. And not a single one doesn't come to the table with a tremendous amount of passion to help us do what we do. So just to give you a little bit of background, we have historically helped kids in financial need up until the age of 18 by providing access to fees to support the cost of registration, transportation, or equipment. We take a very child-centric approach. We don't ask mom and dad what kids want to do, and we certainly don't tell kids what they should do. We ask them, what do you want to do? And that's why we fund over 70 different types of activities. Everything from dance to archery to day camps of all kinds to your traditional sports as well. And that includes parasports, because there are lots of kids who come to us and say, I want to be doing sledge hockey, or I want to play wheelchair basketball. So we've never said no. We've just asked, what do you want to do? We do this through a very extensive network of partners across the country. We have over 2,000 community partner organizations that we work with across Canada. And many of these are organizations that are not just your traditional grassroots community partner organizations, but they are partnerships that we forge and that we can leverage through the extensive sport partnerships that the corporation has. So not only do we work with your traditional organizations working at the grassroots, like your YMCAs and your community centers and your municipal parks and recreation organizations, but we leverage the relationship that Canadian Tire has with the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Canadian Olympic and Paralympic Committees and Hockey Canada. And what this means is we can have that conversation with them too around why not? Why can't we work together to remove these barriers? And so over time, we've been able to help lots and lots and lots of kids overcome that financial barrier. We were talking about gender equity at our table, and one of the things we notice through Jumpstart funding is that we don't have a big gender gap in participation, because as soon as you remove the financial barrier, it eliminates one of the big barriers for girls to participate in sport and physical activity. And we have 46% of the kids that we support across all age groups are girls. We don't have that precipitous drop-off either in the preteens and teens, because again, we've enabled them to overcome one of the big barriers to participation. There are others that we'll be addressing shortly. Stay tuned. We're launching a big initiative in July, a little teaser, with the Coaching Association and Cause. So look forward to that. But last year, we were able to help about 285,000 kids across Canada. But that wasn't enough. Wasn't enough. In Ottawa, what did that amount to? It amounted to about 6,500 kids in this area 54,000 since we started doing this work in 2005. Just shy of $750,000 last year to support kids in this area alone of the country. But like I said, it wasn't enough. About a year ago, partly due to the success, not the success, that's the wrong word, the response to the Wheels ad. By the way, Ty, the young boy who's in that commercial, he's amazing. He's a child who goes to the Bloorview Rehabilitation Center, and we found him, we talked to him, we met his parent. He is one of the most passionate kids you are ever gonna meet. He wants to be an actor. He wants to star in plays on stage. And he credits participating in sport and physical activity for giving him the confidence to be able to perform in front of groups. So partly due to that response, our CEO, Stephen Wetmore, the CEO of Canadian Tire Corporation, came down to the charity one day, literally came downstairs. It's always daunting when he comes downstairs because we never know what he wants. And he asked the question, why not? What is it going to take to remove the barriers for kids with disabilities across Canada? So, of course, I scurried off and started to do a little bit of work with my team, and we reached out to Karen and her team at CPC. We reached out to the Canadian Disabilities Participation Project. We started to reach out to the Rick Hansen Foundation and Special O, and we reached out to a multitude of partners. And what happened was this.
We are here today to participate in an exciting announcement that will help to create a Canada where no child will face barriers to play.
It is our belief that when children of all abilities have the same opportunity to play, Canada wins. And it is with these beliefs that I am honored to announce today that Canadian Tire, in support of Jumpstart, is committing an extra $50 million over the next 5 years to give Canadian kids with disabilities access to sport.
Sports is what life is all about. It teaches you hard work and teamwork, and that's what life is.
To be able to see this announcement today, what a great contribution. Let's hear it for Canadian Tire and Jumpstart.
Jumpstart Play Finds a Way is going to connect kids, empower them, and create more opportunities for sport than ever before for kids in Canada.
We all love to play. We all want to play, and you don't want to see these young kids looking at other kids play but not being able to do it. This is what this program is all about.
That's what happened when we asked why not. So we're pretty excited. We worked, as I said, with a multitude of partners to come up with an evidence-driven framework for how we were going to get that $50 million out where it needed to be. And there are 5 key pillars to this. And it touches on a lot of what Stuart was talking about earlier. So our playground initiative, this isn't just about building playgrounds for the sake of building playgrounds. This is about stimulating a conversation about what inclusive play looks like. We are going to be investing in a playground, at least one playground in every province and territory. It's ranging in size from 10,000 to 15,000 square feet. If that doesn't mean much to you, think about a full-size soccer pitch. It's half the size of a soccer pitch. All inclusive, universally accessible beyond anything we've seen before. And the video will give you a little bit of a glimpse into what that looks like. Our community accessibility grants. We've been told, look, there's infrastructure challenges. So we've created a system of grants. We opened them up in December of last year. They closed in March. We're about to make the announcements in May for the first series of grants. They range anywhere in size from $50,000 for smaller changes that are meaningful, like putting in a more accessible elevator, widening a doorway, putting in a surface that is going to be more accessible for children and mobility devices, to $1 million grants that are really meant to ask, what can we do that is truly innovative when we ask our stakeholders, our partners, our parents, our kids, what do they need to make this facility truly accessible and inclusive? How can we support that kind of innovation? This isn't about prescribed standards that exist. This is about really pushing for a global best standard that doesn't already exist. Our accessible equipment fund, this is where we leverage, again, the competencies of our corporation that backs us, and thinking about how do we source, manufacture, and make available in all those 1,800 retail locations across Canada accessible equipment that is affordable for every child across the country. And so and this is not to put the people who have passionately been working in the space out of business. This is about working with them to help them scale the innovative products that they already have and make them available in a much, much bigger scale than they've ever possibly imagined. So we're already working with sledge manufacturers, with adaptive bicycle manufacturers. The standard, imagine walking into your local Canadian Tire store one day or Sport Chek store and seeing adaptive equipment as the norm. Think about how much that will destigmatize this whole question. Our Parasport Fund, we have been blessed to be working with the Canadian Paralympic Committee for many years on program funding. And we had some conversations around a reverse inclusion basketball program that's been running here in Ottawa as a result of that fund. It was a small fund, I'll be honest with you. It was $300,000 a year, maybe, Karen, $100,000 a year to start. This year it grew to $1 million a year for the next 5 years. So think of the number of kids who will now be able to have those adaptations that Stuart was talking about earlier. This isn't just about, those variations that Stu was talking about earlier, not just adaptation to sport. This is about creating all kinds of options for kids to be able to play. And on that note, the coaching piece, I heard what you were saying at the table. So again, we've got partners in the room, Stephanie among them, that we're working with to create those resources to help youth activity leaders and coaches in every corner of the country do two things. One, understand simply how to welcome kids with different abilities into their facilities. So you made the comment, you were afraid that you were going to say something inappropriate. Well, let's help empower youth activity leaders across the country to feel confident that they can greet a child with a different ability in their facility and not make that mistake. But more importantly, the vision here, if a child with a different ability walks into a swim club one day, we don't want the lifeguard to look at them and say, you're going to have to wait, we're not quite sure what to do with you, stand by the side, we'll get someone to work with you alone. We want them to say, hey, welcome, come join this group. We're going to vary the program that we're giving here so that you can participate with these kids, with everyone, with your friends. I don't mean to sound pedantic, but this is really about inclusion. So we're trying to create these resources. They already exist. We're just helping to make them more digitally digestible and scale them so that everyone can have access to them at any time. And so we'll be launching 3 of these resources at the end of this year. One in partnership with the Canucks Autism Network, one in partnership with the Sport for Life Society, and another with the Active Alliance for Canadians with Disabilities. The Coaching Association is involved, so they'll make it available on their portal. Canadian Paralympic Committee is involved, so we're going to make sure that all the right folks who need to be at the table guiding us through this process are there, and helping us share the best practices around this. Of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't measure and evaluate what we were doing. So a big portion of the investment, it's actually about $500,000 over the next 5 years, is to work through the Canadian Disabilities Participation Project to actually measure and evaluate the impact of all of this work so that we can course correct as we go, we can tweak as we need to, but more importantly, we can inform and hopefully inform public policy, quite frankly. We want to be able to plug into all the conversations that are happening that might have a scalable impact in this space and be able to provide them with some evidence in support of the conversations that are happening. I'm going to give you a little sneak peek at what these playgrounds look like. And before we run the video, we piloted a project in Nanaimo just to get, by the way, I've learned more about playground construction than I really thought I ever, I'm dangerous now, I'm dangerous. I could talk about risers and things like that. But we were at this playground opening, and Michelle Stillwell, some of you might know Michelle, she's an MLA for Nanaimo in the BC legislature, and she is one of our most decorated Paralympic athletes. And of course, I was about to go up and speak, and Michelle starts telling me, you know, when I was a child, It was very difficult because I was in a wheelchair and I couldn't play with my friends. And imagine 30 years later, as a mom, having my child come to me and say, "Mommy, how come you can't play with me like all the other mommies and daddies?" Because we still hadn't solved the problem. So with tears flowing down my face, I had to get up and go and open this playground, and I was a complete hot mess. So let's run the video and show you what this is all about. I'm not sure how anyone's going to know that was a Canadian Tire supported initiative, by the way. I joke. We love the design's actually kind of fun. But just quickly before I pass it back on, Stuart mentioned breaking down the barriers. So without giving you all the industry speak on the technical features of this playground, we're talking about small things that really aren't big investments, but they're meaningful. Transfer stations, little benches at the end of all the equipment. So a child in a wheelchair can autonomously transfer from a slide back to their wheelchair or vice versa without feeling that, oh my gosh, there's a bunch of kids behind me who are going to slide down this thing and hit me off the end of the slide and feel stressed and scared and pressured that they're not going to be able to participate. Double wide ramps with multiple points of entry and exit. It's not just a token here. You can go up this space and come back down the same one, by the way. Parallel play so that kids of all abilities can play together. This isn't about segregating kids with disabilities into certain parts of the playground. This is about creating a space where everyone can play together. So these things are big. I really didn't realize how big they were until we started talking. Even the City of Toronto said 15,000 square feet, that's going to be a problem. We don't have parks that size that are going to... So anyhow, we're very excited. We will be bringing one to Ottawa at some point, so stay tuned for that. But this year we're opening one up in Charlottetown, Calgary, Winnipeg, and Toronto, and Prince Albert, Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Martha. I'd like to get Deborah up here. Where's Deborah? So Deborah is the President and Chief Executive Officer of CIRC. And given that this is all about inclusion, what a great opportunity to take a few minutes to talk about inclusion in the workplace in sport.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank everybody. This is a tremendous opportunity. Thank you to the Ottawa Sport Council for having us here. And so fabulous to see so many people in the room. The fact that we've got all these people who are interested about inclusion that are willing to come is step one in the education, step one in being able to move along. And so I think that's a phenomenal opportunity. For those of you who don't know who CIRC is, the Sport Information Resource Center. So we are your national sport resource center. So from the community level all the way up to our high performance, all of the different sports and everything dealing both with sport, physical activity, sport related. So truly we do deal with information, but we also, our key focus ends up being building the networks and getting that information out. So how do we get the information out? We've done that in a couple of ways, and working together with the Ottawa Sport Council in the fall, we managed to work together on the Concussion Summit, and again, sharing out concussion awareness information as we continue to move forward. But what we're going to talk about in just the next few minutes is about inclusion, which we've just discussed, but it's inclusion both on the field of play as well as off the field of play, so in the workplace. Because here in sport, we have this tremendous opportunity where we're working together both with our Olympians, our Paralympians, on the field of play. We're engaging participation. We're trying to make it inclusive, as everybody was talking about it. And so, well, how can we take that from both what we're trying to do, we're one of those leaders, we're trying to do it on the field of play, how can we bring it into the workplace? When we think of what we're doing, especially with our Paralympians, our athletes, what everyone has been discussing, we talk about excellence. How can we achieve excellence? We talk about it, whether it's in performance, but also in our coaching. It's in our programs. It's in how we work with each other. How can we be the best that we can be? How can we go after that? And so when we think of that, it's, okay, so how do we be excellent, which is what we're embracing, but at that next level? How can we perhaps be considering that as we're going forward? So on this case, I'd like to just also make reference and a special thank you, because CIRC is, as the resource center, we're very pleased to be working together, and we share a location with the Canadian Paralympic Committee. And so special shout out to a lot of the people who are here in the office, but also for them providing a lot of the photos. So you'll see some beautiful imagery that is embracing the, our inclusion and our aspiring for our athletes. So one of the things when we talk about on the field and off the field is how do we build our best team? That team ends up being the team that's going to be playing together, the team that's going to be supporting each other. It's the coaches, it's the background, it's our researchers, it's everybody on the field of play. We're building that team, but also within our organization. It ends up being our volunteers, it becomes our board, it becomes our staff, it becomes the team. So you really have to look at, well, how could we also be inclusive when we're building that team? How can the administrators embrace that? How can they think that it's right embedded into our thought process that we're being inclusive? Because inclusive means you're expanding the pool to get the highest competency of your team. You want to say, I want the best team. Well, let's make sure we're looking everywhere, because those skill sets, especially as we've seen in sport, a lot is built. There is so many other competencies and skills built. Let's make sure we're being inclusive all the way. So within that, as we discussed, and I think, Marco, you said it brilliantly, and Stuart, we were saying, okay, well, how can we be better? How can we raise the bar as a sector? And I think that's where our opportunity is lying, is the sports sector is already embracing inclusion. We're already looking on the field of play how to be excellent. We're already trying to say, as evidence this morning, okay, what can we do? But how can we also do that with our own programs, with our employees, with our staff, with our programs, everything that we're doing? Could we actually be a leader? Could we say sport embraces it all the way? How can we raise that bar? And so my few minutes now is just to talk on that career section. There are so many different careers in sport. We spend a lot of time working with universities and high schools and colleges, trying to engage the emerging leaders of tomorrow. We're trying to engage the youth. We're trying to inspire them so that they can go on and continue to contribute into society. So they could be, especially a lot of them that love sport. They're passionate about sport, but they can go into engineering, they could go into medicine, they could go into journalism, you could be loving sport and still be touching it in so many different ways. And so for those of you who do know CIRC, you will know that we actually have the national job board for sport. So anything sport related, and it has been, anybody who's posting careers that are looking for volunteers across the country, everybody goes to circ.ca/careers. And you'll see even today, as I was looking last night, there's great positions in Ottawa. Kudos to the Nepean Hotspurs that are doing recruitment, West Ottawa Soccer, Gymnastics Canada. Everybody is posting their positions on the CIRC job board, so everyone can access it. But what we're also doing is we're leveraging that, because now one of the opportunities that we have is that we're working together with the Accessibility Directorate of Ontario. We're working together with all of our partners to say, So how, if we've already got our employers coming in, could we make the sports sector the example, the leader to be more inclusive, that they can be even more inclusive in the workplace? How can we share, as was described this morning, there are a lot of tools, there are a lot of resources. Normally, it's just, we don't know they exist. One of the biggest challenges is how do we share that information? How do we get the message out to all of our sport organizations, to our clubs, to our parents, so that they know, oh, this is how we can speak with, and be inclusive of everybody on the field. How do we share that information? So the project, as we're undertaking it very much, is to embrace inclusion both on and off the field of play. So with that, what we're also describing, and Stuart excellently referred to, what are the opportunities? And this is a tremendous opportunity that we're hoping we can reach out to everybody. Because within this, we have the chance to make the sports sector the leader both nationally, but the leader especially here in Ottawa, because we're here. How could we really say, okay, we want everyone to know. We want it to be in our orientation with our board members, with our staff, with our onboarding, in our HR practices. We want it to be that everybody is inclusive, that they're aware of how do we build the capacity. We're not saying, and as our table was discussing, how do we accommodate? We're saying, how do we become flexible so that we can actually integrate everybody in, that we've got the strongest strength and we've got the best teams so that we can raise the bar and deliver on our programs together. So within that, there lies those opportunities, both for all of us to demonstrate leadership, that we can say, yeah, we can make a difference here, that we can turn around, include it, we can embrace it, and that we can engage our youth. In particular, one of the challenges that was identified is our youth that are coming out, our university students, our Algonquin students, all of our different pieces. How can we build their resume so that as well, when they're applying to get a job, when they're trying to go forward, they've also got that experience. They've got the experience on their resume, the confidence within them that they've learned from the work environment just as much as any student out there. So it's taking that lens from our side that says, what can we do? So what we're doing is looking and seeking partners. We're seeking opportunities that we can say, how do we share the message? What else can we do to expand the reach? How can we also help both the sport organizations, but our athletes, our participants as well, so that they're comfortable, they identify some of the skills. Many of them have a lot of strengths, a lot of competencies, but they don't necessarily highlight it on their resume or when they're speaking. So from both sides of the coin, we want to help those that are going to be engaging so that we identify, what can we do so that it's like, this is what we're looking for, or the environment that we work in or that we share is an inclusive, it's accessible, that it's a good environment, but also from our next generation of leaders. Well, what are some of those assets they have? If they work with the team, if they're goal setting, if they really can, they've got those strengths, let's make sure that they're comfortable highlighting it. So as we look to different partners to reach out, and one of the examples ends up being, for example, Carleton. So Carleton is just going to be announcing, and on the CERC job board, as well as different vehicles, we'll be sharing with everybody. They've got an opportunity that's also allowing employers to be able to connect with some of the students, especially at Carleton, that have students with disabilities. They've got funding to help support the engagement, to provide what they're referring to as experiential learning. So this becomes an example of just this week of a partner who has come forward to say, we would like to help. How can we make those connections as we go forward? Hopefully, there are a lot of other opportunities as we speak and we reach out with other partners in the group. Obviously, we're working very closely with Karen and the team at the Canadian Paralympic Committee. We're working together with the Ottawa Sport Council to get the word out. We hope to be sharing that and going forward. But that ends up being our key mission right now. And I would ask if there are other people out there that are seeing, oh, how can we get the message out? What could we be sharing? What other opportunities could we be doing to make the sports sector really that leader in saying, yeah, we are inclusive. We are embracing exactly what we're doing today. How can we move forward? So with that, I would say thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. I love your energy, by the way. My key takeaway, I love the 4 pillars. Start early, engage, integrate, and trailblaze. I thought that was very powerful. The Ottawa Sport Council has a great belief. We believe there should only be positive experiences in sport. If you're having great ones, how do we make sure you continue? How do we learn from each other? And if you're not, what can we do to help each other? So with that said, Ian, are we ready for this?
I think so. My name is Ian Mendes. I am the host of TSN 1200, The Drive, every day. I know all of you listen, right? I am happy to be here today. And I'm here as a broadcaster, I think, to hopefully help facilitate this panel. But I do want to just share a little bit of a story with all of you so you understand that I think that I understand, I'm empathetic to what everyone is possibly dealing with in this room. So we've got 2 daughters. Our oldest daughter, when my wife was pregnant with her, I think I was a typical dad or a father-to-be. And I thought, my goodness, my child, I can't wait. And we didn't know if it was going to be a boy or a girl. And I was like, I can't wait to put my son or daughter into sports. I'm going to put them in hockey, and I'm going to put them in baseball, because baseball was my favorite sport as a kid. And all of a sudden, my wife was about 7 months pregnant. We went for what we thought was going to be a routine ultrasound. And I'll never forget the moment, the technician was looking at the screen, and they had to call in a doctor. They said, I'm really sorry, but we're not seeing critical pieces of your daughter's brain or your child's brain on radar. And that moment of having your world, just the rug pulled out from under you, and then some of you have probably been down that road, and some of you know what it's like. I can't tell you what it's like. It is crushing, because all of those dreams that you had for your child, that they're going to play sports and they're going to be a shortstop for the New York Yankees or the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, or all the things that you thought they're going to be, that goes out the window. And my daughter was born Canada Day 2004, July 1st, 2004. And as soon as she came out, they put her in for an MRI, because they could finally do like a proper diagnosis when she was born. And they went for an MRI at CHEO, and they came back and they said, look, it looked like half your daughter's brain, it looks like, is missing, okay? And I immediately said, okay, that comes from my wife's side of the family. No, but you know, it was one of those situations where at CHEO they said, look, we think we can help the situation here. Your daughter's going to need a shunt. And I don't know if people in this room are familiar with a shunt, but it's basically a tube that would run from her brain into her abdominal cavity, and they felt like there was this massive cyst in our daughter's brain. They thought they could collapse it and perhaps help her situation. Well, it did, and we handed her over for brain surgery at CHEO at 9 days old, okay? 9 days old. Your child's like the size of a loaf of bread, and you hand them over, and there's so much trust that you have to have with medical professionals. And you know what? It was great. She had to have a shunt revision at 7 months old, but she was really delayed. Like, our daughter couldn't walk. Other kids were 18 months and 2 years old, and they're walking and running around, and our daughter didn't have the ability. We had to go to physiotherapy with our daughter, and we had to go through all sorts of different things to try and get her sort of gross motor skills to where they needed to be. So she always lagged behind, and she had this shunt, and throughout her those years, we were just trying to play catch up. We just wanted her to be able to, she couldn't even walk up the stairs to go when she was 3 years old. You know, all these other kids are going up the stairs to go up a slide and go down. She couldn't do it. She just physically didn't have the ability to do it. And so it took a long, long time for her to be able to do that. But as we got her a little bit older, she closed the gap, but it was always in the back of our minds, she's got a shunt, and she's going to be different. And we can't put her into sports. And it always kind of broke my heart, because I never wanted I joke when I say I wanted my child to be the shortstop for the Yankees or the Cowboys quarterback, but really all I ever wanted for my kids was to have what I did in childhood, which was to be a part of a team and to be a part of something greater. And I think that's what really blows me away today, is that now that I see it, and our daughter's 14, and it's been, I'll be honest with you, the last 15 months have been really tough for us. She had to have a shunt revision last year. She tried to play basketball this season. She couldn't get through the year. She texts me this last week, for example. Every day she had to send me a text at around noon. She can't get through the day at school right now because she's having headaches and nausea and vomiting. And listen, the only reason I'm saying this is I understand what it's like to be a parent of a child who's had issues. And I know that at some point things are going to get better for us. And what's really inspiring about this group of people today is I know that somewhere I'm going to find a spot for her. to fit into sports, to fit into whatever it is. And maybe it won't be basketball, maybe it'll be something else completely different, but I wanted to share that with you because I don't want to just simply be, I'm here today, honestly, hopefully to lend my broadcasting skills to the group here, but also I'm here as a dad, and I'm here as somebody who really is invested in inclusivity in sports, and I've understood what it's like to be a parent with challenges. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of that background as we kick off the panel here today. We'll kick things off. Stephanie Joel's going to join us here. She's the VP of training programs at the Canucks Autism Network, and she's here all the way from Vancouver. And first of all, Stephanie, we'll get you to grab a seat there. Welcome to Ottawa. The weather's been like this for what, 6 weeks, 7 weeks? So this is typical. But I hope that I shared a little bit of a story, a personal story for kind of why I'm invested in this, and maybe Stephanie, you could do the same thing. Tell this panel, we're going to have all the panel members tell this, but just tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your organization, and why you're committed to this cause.
Sure. Hi. So it's a pleasure to be here today, and I want to thank Lisa from Awesome Ottawa, who is an awesome colleague of mine doing great work here with kids with autism. So thanks for the invite. I'm here today. I represent the Canucks Autism Network. We're a nonprofit based in Vancouver, and we kind of have two parallel focuses when it comes to kids with autism in sport. One is that we provide supported, what we like to think of as first involvement experiences. So unfortunately, we meet a number of families who have had less than ideal experiences in sport and recreation. And we use our programs as that chance for kids and their parents as well to kind of build confidence and see sport as a possibility for their kids again. And the second half of what we do, and we invest a lot of time and energy and effort into this, is to try to build capacity in the sport and recreation sector to support kids with autism. And really not just autism. Like, I've been on this journey of working with the sports sector for 3 or 4 years now. And the feedback we consistently get when we're in the community is, you realize this is not, really not autism that you're talking about. You're talking about universal behavior supports that help coaches be more effective with a wide range of kids, in fact, all kids. So the resource we're very, very happy to be developing with Jumpstart, thanks, Marco, is trying to make that knowledge really explicit for recreation leaders and sport coaches. So what are those core behavior sort of techniques that you can use with your whole group, not just the kid with autism, not just the kid with ADHD, not just the kid with FASD, that are going to help all kids be successful. I also want to give a shout out to Awesome Ottawa, who's doing some great work here in Ottawa. They're doing training with any sport and recreation provider who wants to learn more about autism, and they have their next session coming up in May. So local group here as a resource for you, check that out. I got into this because I started in camps with kids with autism and thought, oh my God, this is the funnest thing I've ever done, and was very lucky to be able to find a career where I get to do it all the time. And it just so happens that now I have a nephew with autism, so I very much live in this world as a family member too.
Paul Hawksworth is going to join us here from the Ottawa Rowing Club, and I know he's also been a part of Rowing Canada over the years, so we'll get Paul up here next to Stephanie, and just do the same thing here. Paul, if you can just explain a little bit about your position, your role, and what kind of drives you to, or what drove you to be here today.
I work at the Ottawa Rowing Club. I have worked for Rowing Canada. I've been involved in the sport as a coach for a long, long time. And now learning to be a learning facilitator for coaches and that sort of thing. I came from the sort of able-bodied sport background, coached able-bodied athletes, and was fortunate enough to coach the World Championships and under-23 Worlds and Pan Ams and that sort of stuff. But it just so happened that my wife and I relocated to Ottawa, and the only work I could continue to do with Rowing Canada was with the para rowing program. I'm not saying that in any sort of negative way. In fact, I really embraced the opportunity. I'm a twin, so my twin brother he's a paraplegic. So I already had a background, I guess, or sort of an understanding of the resources out there for people with disabilities who want to be involved in sport, because my brother, in comparison to me, had far fewer opportunities. So, I mean, the goal really for me at the time was to make sure that, or to do my very, very best to make sure that people with disabilities in rowing could have a similar experience to what our able-bodied athletes were getting. And so that's where I come from. That's my background. Now I'm the technical director of the club. I have a job to oversee all of our programs and make sure we have coaches and an opportunity for anybody who comes into the club.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Paul. Next, we'll call up John Rapp with the Dovercourt Rec Association.
So Dovercourt formed in the 70s with a bunch of hippies that decided they wanted to seize control of the community center and make it more community responsive, and successfully lobbied the city over 10 years to build the new recreation center in 1987, and have never let go of that control. And part of their attitude, you remember hippies? It's so refreshing to talk to a group of people that remember the 70s. I have 200 staff between the ages of 14 and 20 something. I have to go to Carlingwood to feel good about myself. So that idea that all abilities are welcome, and you should recognize that catchphrase, all abilities welcome. You've heard that before, I hope. When you were talking about a brand that everybody should have on their organization, that's one that we were involved in helping create with the Active Living Alliance, and we embraced it from the start. It's always been that everybody should be welcome at Dovercourt, and so that's a daily challenge. Stuart and Ian from the Ability Center came to visit me a couple of years ago and totally demoralized me about my architecture, which won awards for accessibility, but has to change, has to evolve, has to keep up every day. It only works until you meet the person it doesn't work for. And so for us, our biggest asset really is attitude. That's Dovercourt's attitude, that everybody should be welcome, and we work hard at that every day. So I'm here because my young staff obviously embrace this. They've grown up in an entirely different reality than I did. People were not shipped off to Brockville anymore. They are amongst us. They are living the experience of meeting and being in a classroom with children of all abilities every day. That's what they expect in their recreation center, and that's what we do.
Thank you very much, John. Final member of our panel this morning is L.A. Schmidt. We'll have her come up here. She's with the Ottawa River Canoe Club, where she's the canoe and kayak coach.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I was totally shocked to be asked, actually, because I think probably our club was one of the most inaccessible locations possible on the side of a cliff 10 kilometers that way on the Ottawa River. In 2002, my husband and I established the club and founded the club, and from the very get-go, there was no question that everybody was going to paddle at our club. And I think that mindset resonated with every member who walked through the door of the club. And it didn't take us long. In 2002, we had our first paddle all participant. At the time, I know, Allison, I think you made the statement about taglines, and our sport, Canoe Kayak Canada, came up with paddle all. And it was every boat, every body. And so that tagline was our initial tagline to get everybody in a boat at our club and in our national sport organization. And I love the tagline today, why not? We're at a point now where we were brought into Rio for the Para Games. That's our first inclusive event for Canoe Kayak. And this summer, I know we just started working with Special Olympics Canada, which is amazing, in the Partner in Play program, and that's taken a very long time, but we're so grateful that we're in there now. And I look at that and say, wow. Our provincial coach says, well, the Ontario Summer Games are this summer. And I said, so where's the paddle all event happening, and is it included? Have we got funding for that? And they said no, and I said, well, we should, and we've just been told that's happening. So I think the why not tag that we've got going here is so important, and I'm really pleased to be here. There's so much knowledge in the room, and I look forward to learning just as much from you as hopefully we all learn together today. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much, L.A. Maybe we'll start with a few of the questions that were asked in the room here, and I know that a lot of questions were also submitted in advance electronically, and I do have a little bit of a amalgamation of some of those questions that are a little different than these. But why don't we start? I think it was Allison who had the question in the back there about, and you touched on this, the tagline. Is there a way to come up with and I think the question was basically a tagline or a visual, like something that's very simple to convey the message of mixed participation or inclusivity?
We talked about All Abilities Welcome. So that was an initiative from the Active Living Alliance. It was aimed at people like me that run recreation or sports centers across the country, and it was a bit of a handbook about how to make sure that you're walking the talk when you talk about All Abilities Welcome. So that initiative launched out. Like a lot of initiatives that were initially federally funded, the funding shifted and ALA kind of disappeared, but I'm happy to say they're back. And so do reach out to them and rejoin there. So to me, that tagline was perfect, All Abilities Welcome. And it's something that we intend to promote again on pretty much all of our literature.
It's really hard for people with invisible disabilities. So actually when Marco was doing the Inclusive Playground project, he reached out to a number of people and said, how do we show, what visual representation can we show that, invisible disabilities, and they're invisible disabilities. So really challenging. I love All Abilities Welcome. And sometimes I think the parents that we support, to be honest, they're still, and I'm in Vancouver, so I can't speak to Ottawa, but they're still often very surprised when an organization actually says, oh, your son or daughter has autism. We would love to have them in our program. It's not, okay, the parents are nodding. So just as an example, shout out to Canoe Kayak. So we do these events where we call them training and tryouts, and in the morning we train a bunch of sport coaches, and we insist that the PSO is involved as well. And then in the afternoon, we bring in a bunch of kids with autism, and the sport coaches who had the training in the morning get to work with the kids with autism. And we did this last year at one club, Canoe Kayak Club in Burnaby, BC, and the coach in the club walked around and handed out a brochure about their summer camp to every parent who had a child participating in the tryout and said, we'd just love for your son or daughter to come out. And parents were, I kid you not, in tears because they had never been invited that way to participate. So it's really difficult to capture visually, but anything you can do to make it a really active outreach, maybe like an actual event where you really deliberately welcome families in, can be very powerful.
One of the questions that came up earlier, about an hour ago or so, was, I think it was from that table, about coaching, and maybe this is for Paul and for LA to talk a little bit about the coaching aspect of what are some of the challenges to, let's talk about maybe kids with special needs. And just because you've had one special needs child 2 years ago doesn't mean that the special needs child that's going to walk into your club is going to be the exact same. And maybe, Paul, you can start a little bit about some of the challenges of coaching special needs children.
The Ottawa Rowing Club is like many. I mean, we're one of the biggest in Canada, but it's like many in Canada, and I'm sure it's similar to paddling, where we have, despite having about 1,000 people that come out and row every year, we only have 2 employees. So we're really, what we do is really based on volunteers, and we don't always have a lot of flexibility to be sort of demanding in terms of the volunteer and the skills that they come with. So it's really important that for us, that we provide as much training as we can, and just try to include training on how to work with people with disabilities. So it's a challenge, I find. I think now rowing's pretty good at providing training that is specific to our Paralympic program. But when we sort of go outside of our Paralympic program and our Paralympic events, there's a lack of resources. So it is still a challenge. It's still a challenge for us. But what we can, I think what we can confidently say, certainly is that within our pocket, we know how to deliver a program to people with disabilities. So that's not perfect, but I think by being able to provide something to a portion of the population with disabilities that we know is of a high quality, we can gain a lot of confidence and then move forward from there.
I'd like to add as well, I think our boom at the Canoe Club came when Emily and Ashley came down with families. We did what was called Give It a Go days at our club. So we basically shut the club down for a couple of hours, and we invited all of our participants with people they trusted. We're working in a water environment, so for some it may be frightening. For parents, I can only imagine. And so we welcomed everybody down. So we had everybody there. We started in the most stable boat. the largest boat, a dragon boat. We went with our outriggers, our OC6s, and then we brought out the sit-on-top kayaks, which is our general introductory boat for everybody in the club. And we phrase it that way. Everyone in our canoe club starts in this boat. And we just found that if we surrounded our participants with people they were very comfortable with and trusted, that was a great start. And then we built they built trust in us as we progressed. I would agree most of our coaches are volunteers, and most of them are adults, but that's okay. We've had some of our youth, and I know at the Rideau Canoe Club as well, it's the most populated volunteer program in our canoe club. In fact, I have to turn people away at times because I just don't have enough participants. We have 20 and we have sometimes two volunteers per person. But I think the joy in all of it as well is that families, we're getting everybody on the water together. And I've heard from a number of people say the joy is being able to do something with my child with a disability that I've never been able to do before. And so we have doubles as well, so we can put sister, brother, mother, son, and daughter. So it's kind of cool.
One of the things that really came back, I think, on the emails when people were trying to throw out questions was fundraising and trying the financial hurdles of sometimes trying to get equipment that is very specialized. And maybe Stephanie and John, I think probably everyone can maybe speak to this on some level, because there's very rare equipment that you might need. It's specialized and it's very, very costly. So I don't know if Stephanie, you want to, people are just, I think, in this audience looking for any advice or tips on how would you go about trying to raise funds? How would you try and go about purchasing what can be very costly equipment?
I have a little bit of experience, but I would just say the biggest successes I have had is just talking to everybody. So just get out there and start talking. Talk in mainstream sport, talk in disability sport, talk to government. Just get your name out there. People will just start saying to you things like, oh, have you heard of this grant? Or did you know about this program? And you can get, we work with a collaborative out in Victoria. And I think it's the kind of thing that's going to form out of this event, where it's a bunch of people who are really interested in adapted sport. Anyways, when this collaborative came together, they found out that there were 35 sledge hockey chairs just sitting, not being used. And as a result of people coming together, they found the right people, they pieced together a program, and now they have a very robust sledge hockey program. So I think just talk. Yes, it's a true challenge. Yes, the equipment is very expensive. There's not much of a way around that I can see, but just keep talking.
Well, I would just encourage you all to be shameless and promiscuous and polygamous. We have an annual, I'm not sure that came out right, but we have an annual speed dating event where we bring together groups like this from all sorts of agencies that are involved in accessibility and recreation and community development. And literally it is speed dating. We say, who are you? What does your agency do? What do you have to share and what do you need? So for us, the obstacle, for example, for our disabled swims is the ability for people to get to them. So we're surrounded by lots of community housing that are literally a 5-minute walk away, but it's an hour-and-a-half bus ride, because they have to go back to Tunney's and then find their way back on the 15, which doesn't run that often, and so on. And so I met Ottawa West Community Support, which has passenger vans, and they're busy in the evening and not busy during the day. And I went, ooh, perfect. So they had enough funding to get me going for 5 months, and then at the end of that 5 months, that gave me time to find a sponsor. So La Pointe Fish sponsors the swim bus with a big fish on the side made out of magnets. And the connection there is that the disabled swim at Dovercourt is called Annie's Swim. It's named after Anne Vivian, who passed away from a brain tumor, and her dad was one of the owners of La Pointe Fish. So when you were talking about finding your way, wiggling around, you'd be surprised in your network who you know and what you can do. So that shameless thing, if anybody would like a boat named after them, I was just talking to the Nepean Sailing Club, and they were saying they would love to have better internet, right, Emily? And who's running back and forth trying to solve problems. So they'll name a boat after you. We would name anything after you. We have a Westboro Station dental room. We have Neil Orr Networks room, and these folks are all paying me money for exposure. Yesterday, I bought a play structure, and a local dentist agreed to pay for it if I could put his name on it. So Chris Granger Family Dental Play Structure is now in operation.
I would also suggest that if you're on a board, grab somebody who's great at grant writing. We just received a Paddle $38,000 grant, community action grant, last week. And I can only say that that beats many bottle drives and other things. And it is all about an integrated program. So if you can show that you're using these grants in a really smart way in your organization, I think it's great.
Networking is really, really important. Reaching out. Well, I mean, for instance, in rowing, our boats are actually fairly expensive, and people aren't going to have one at their cottage or anything like that. So, but there are enough of them around that have been purchased by the provincial sport organization, the national sport organization, or at other rowing clubs, which are not being used. They just sit on the racks. So, ask around, and hopefully you can get the equipment you need.
And one thing I'd like to follow up on, if I could, when I was a journalism student at Carleton, I was looking for any opportunity to get involved in sports. Like I used to do volunteer work with, I think it was Alpine Canada. Like I had no interest in skiing, but I just wanted to, I just wanted to get involved in sports so that I would build up my resume and start making connections. And it was a great opportunity. And I always think to myself, if you're an organization out there and you're looking to get somebody to write a grant, or you're looking for somebody to maybe do social media or do something, this town is chock full of young journalism potentials, public relations people at, Algonquin is here as well, Carleton, Ottawa. There's a wonderful, I think, depth of young people in this community that are so eager to help out. I would really encourage you, because I just think back to my time, 20 years ago as a journalism student at Carleton. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to write. I wanted to be involved in sport, and it didn't matter what the sport was. It didn't have to be something I was super passionate about. I just wanted to be involved. So that I would really highly encourage you to reach out to Carleton, to Algonquin or Ottawa. Reach out to their various programs and say, do you mind putting this posting up? Say, look, we're looking for a volunteer writer. We have a grant. We just, these kids are so talented. They're really good, really good writers, and I'd highly encourage that. Is there a way to be more collaborative amongst groups?
There are great resources that people have that they might have succeeded in getting a grant to own one, and they use it 10% of the time. And so if you can really leverage it and make it busy all the time, it's a wonderful result.
And further to that, I think it would be awesome for the sport groups to get connected somehow as well. So, the swimmers in the winter can paddle in the summer, or the skiers in the winter can paddle in the summer, the sledge hockey in the winter can paddle, or row or whatever it is. But we can start a circuit so even those that want to participate maybe at a higher level know where to go and who to contact. And that's always been a struggle for us as paddling people. But, doing the speed dating and following up with that with the contacts would be awesome.
And I would add to LA's point. A lot of my background, as I mentioned earlier, was in competitive sport and even national team, and trying to build a national team. But you quickly recognized that at all levels, so what most community organizations are doing does not meet the same standard that's available for able-bodied participants, right? Because of the number of people in able-bodied programs. They have tiers of programs, right? You got the entry-level program, you get to participate twice a week. You got the next program, you get to participate, 4 times a week. You got the next program, and the sky's the limit in some cases. But in parasport, except for on a few rare occasions or places where they were very well integrated with able-bodied programs, it required, I think, all the sports to work together to provide sort of a sport experience that some of our, particularly the athletes who are able-bodied, who are able to take advantage of. We all need to share our resources and our time in order just to provide the same thing. And we had a lot of sledge hockey players who were rowing. You kind of see the seasonal issues, but we ran a year-round program for para rowing. So, we had guys, erging in the winter and lifting weights with us, and then going to sledge hockey practice, and to me that's really effective and great because none of us would have been able to provide enough sessions to really provide a high performance or high performance development environment all by ourselves.
I think the question, I apologize because I didn't get your name, sir, but I think your question from that table was, like, are we basically ready to roll up our sleeves and really make sports more inclusive? Like, are we at that point where organizations, bodies are willing to make those commitments? Do you think at this stage of the game, Stephanie?
I think people are more ready to do it than they ever have been before. So from the seat that I sit in, again, with my lens, I've attended the Sport for Life conference here in Gatineau the past 3 years. And the first year we went, I would literally sort of follow people from the Coaching Association of Canada around and be like, hey, autism, hey, like, what's the high performance pathway for an athlete with autism? And a lot of people had never even thought of that question. Or they think Special Olympics, which for some athletes with autism is an excellent high performance pathway. But for some athletes with autism, it's absolutely mainstream sport, should be their high performance pathway. So anyway, doing this. And then I got in there the next year and I was able to do a workshop and a little presentation. And then this year, they had an entire stream sponsored by Jumpstart on inclusion. An entire stream of the conference just dedicated to inclusion. Now, having said that, you kind of get, me and Stuart and other people walking around in our pack, going to all the inclusive sessions, but slowly, over time, the interest is really growing. I think there's a huge wave right now of interest. And that's, it's obviously amazing to see the investment Jumpstart is making, but I think in general, this conversation is really happening. And the caveat that I always put out there in terms of the invisible disability piece is, we need to think really creatively. I love that word when it comes to supporting inclusion. So training, I think, is absolutely, you have to have it. It's fundamental, right? But if this is the story I hear a lot. If I'm a summer camp, day camp leader, and I have 25 kids, and I have one kid with autism who might run off the field if they have a meltdown, is that a safe, successful environment for that child? Maybe not. So what we need to really push ourselves to think about are how do we make that fully inclusive environment a safe, successful, good environment for that kid and all the kids, which means not just training, but sometimes other types of creative solutions involving partnerships. How can we bring more volunteers in? Anyway, all I'm trying to say is I think this conversation is we don't want to give up if we don't want to get it right the first time, because I don't think we should expect it to always be easy, and every child is so different and every club and situation is so different. But let's go into the conversation knowing that and expecting it and being really ready with all of our creativity and our passion to find solutions that really work.
And I think, and along those lines, as we talk about trying to break down barriers, this is a story I think I told on the radio maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and maybe this name doesn't mean anything to anybody. Tariq El Abour. Does anybody know who Tariq El Abour is? No one knows that name. The Kansas City Royals, Major League Baseball team, signed Tariq El Abour about 3 weeks ago, and he's a young man who has autism. It's believed to be the first time any professional sports team in the Big Four, NBA, NHL, NFL, and Major League Baseball, has signed a player who has been diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. And I thought, I was so excited to tell this story on the radio. This would have been maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And I just thought, there we go. That you just need some barriers to be broken down. So I'd like to agree with Stephanie. Like, it feels like I know it still feels like we're miles away from where we need to be, but it still feels like we're way ahead of where we were 10 or 15 years ago. So it feels like there's progress, and it might feel glacial at times, but I just thought that if you get a chance, check out, just Google search Kansas City Royals signed player with autism, and it's a really heartwarming story, and his mom is interviewed, and it'll really make you rethink the way that maybe sports, or where sports could be headed here in the next, hopefully 10 or 15 years. Another topic that was brought up, and it was one of the tables over there that talked about, what about trying to make things inclusive so that siblings or friends can also join in and participate? Is that an issue that you're seeing? And if so, again, this is all about inclusivity and maybe trying to clear hurdles and barriers. How do we allow siblings and friends to participate on the same playing field, or in your case, maybe rowing together or something of that nature?
Yeah, in our sport, it's really interesting. We've always been inclusive, so we have a 5-day national championships or provincial championships or what have you, and we just ask the questions. And sometimes people don't even have an answer, and I love when they don't have an answer because then you know you're in. So we just kept saying, well, how about this? And why don't we try this? And so we have the luxury of having singles, doubles, and fours in our sport. And so we are always paddling with anybody. And that's the joy. And we've been really lucky that our national and provincial sport organizations have all said, if we want to go to a local regatta and I'm going to paddle with Paulo, they're like, oh my gosh, Paulo and LA are coming down, and it just happens and we do it. And I think not being afraid to just ask the question and then just roll right through the door and take over, and it works.
Just, I guess it starts with that attitude that, you want to know what our policy is on accessibility? Because I make my staff memorize it. Are you ready? You want to know? You already know it's yes. And so that just, you just say yes. And there's some parent ninjas in the room, parents of children with disabilities here. Why the heck would you want to mess with them? From the time their child was born, they've been fighting with every institution. They lie, cheat, and steal to get what they need for their children. Don't mess with them, make them your allies. So when you say yes up front, the questionnaire doesn't become a tool to decide whether you're going to serve them or not. It becomes a tool to ensure that they get success, and it changes the dialogue. Parents stopped lying to me 15 years ago when I said, tell me the truth, I need the manual on Sophie. And when you're talking about a child with autism that takes off, yeah, we were in the same boat as the city of Ottawa 15 years ago where we're saying, well, we can't take them because they're a danger to themselves and others. That's the catch-out, right? Everybody has a policy. We can't host them if they're a danger to themselves or others. Everybody's a danger to themselves. And so we kind of went, okay, so what's the solution? Well, for us, Camp Buddies, which oddly enough was pioneered out in BC. We all need to move to BC. They think differently. Might be what you're smoking, but it is that thing where what does a child with autism need? They need someone who understands them, and when they've had enough, we'll go with them to a quiet place, sit by our waterfall, and then when they're ready to re-engage, come back. We have kids in our camp that haven't been a minute in the camp that they're signed up for, but it's still a success because the buddy's having fun with them and they're wandering around the grounds, the parents get respite, and the kid gets some socialization experience. So choose what you think victory is, not by your measure, but what the parents need and what the child will engage. And so that whole approach kind of changes the whole dialogue. The other thing I'd say, just to go back to your question about, are we ready, do we need to? The answer is, yeah, you better. Jim pointed out it's the largest minority in Canada. We could all be members momentarily. We're just lucky they aren't militant because they are covered in the Charter of Rights. They have a right to be served. And so we have to stop thinking about this is a nice thing to do and recognize it's the thing you must do. It is, it's an imperative. And so stop thinking about, I will choose to be nice and try and accommodate you, and say, I must. And that changes the way you think as well. Whose job is it to remove the obstacle? It's not that person, it's yours. I'm a gatekeeper. I run a recreation facility. My job is to figure out what is stopping this person from coming and get rid of it. And there's all these excuses. Well, we don't provide personal care attendants. What if that's what they need to participate? Well, guess what? That policy went out the window about 3 weeks ago when I realized that this guy that wanted to be a Paralympian and was signing up for private swimming lessons, the one thing he needed was somebody to help him in the change room, to get in his bathing suit, and when he came out, to help him get out of his bathing suit. Well, and the policy is we don't do personal care attendants. You have to find a family member. Somebody kept saying, I can't come up with somebody. And I kind of went, I can't. This is not his problem, it's mine. So I pulled my staff that are on duty at that time. I got about 6 or 8 staff there, lifeguards, swimming instructors, customer service. And my maintenance guy said, I can do that. I have a sister disabled, no big deal. And so off he is. And I just kind of went, okay, well that changed that policy immediately. You have to be ready to, when an obstacle comes up, say, that's a new one. What's your solution? It's not that person's problem, it's yours. And so we're all gatekeepers. We need to open the friggin' gate.
Does anyone else have any questions here right now? Yeah.
How do you remove the stigma of having a child with a disability so that parents can and will ask for support?
Well, I'll start by just that whole thing about when they show up, that you say yes at the start, that there's no screening, there's no questionnaires, there's no, and also just fill your place with examples. And so your place should be full of diversity in terms of employees, staff, all the things that Cirque talked about in terms of create an environment where it's not a surprise. In this last year, I fired clients before I fired. So there was a group of clients that came and said they were concerned with my WAVE, which is my adult autism group, because when they're there, some of them have vocalization and Tourette's, and they'll have meltdowns in the lobby. And these seniors came to me and said, we don't think it's appropriate that they're here. And I said, okay, I've got a problem with that, so they're coming, and so what you have to decide is whether you're coming when they're here, because they have just as much right to be here as you, and they decided they weren't coming. And I kind of went, bye. I'd rather fire you than lose my principal, because I have a really strong board of directors who believe very strongly in this. And it's vested in us that that's the way the place is going to be. So I'd rather fire a client who doesn't accept that's the hippie atmosphere that is Dover Court.
I also would just like to add that we also lead by example. We actually hire our staff, and this year we hired our first coach, Paulo, with Down syndrome, and he coached several of his own athletes, and we empowered him to do that. We are also looking this summer at hiring several of our autism paddlers, and they're going to help me at the canteen at lunch, and we're going to serve food to campers and be involved and engaged in helping out and making things work. So our staff is we're leading by example as well. So our entire venue, when you come down certain times of the day or the weekend, everybody's there. We're all there together, and there's never an issue. Every new building, every new piece of equipment, every ramp, everything that goes in is now there for everybody. So we just work that way.
One of the challenges that I think we have is a lot of our programs are out there for getting people with disabilities to be included in sport are directed only at those athletes. And so what are your experiences? What are some of the ideas to be able to do the reverse integration, get everybody involved in those programs, knowing that there's limited funding, knowing that there's limited ability, I guess, or capacity for some of those programming opportunities?
For us, we would look at an ability of a paddler in our sport, and we would base it on their speed level, for example. So our master's paddling program is very strong. We race nationally and internationally with our master's program. And in Paulo, another good example, he's master's age now, so we've just transitioned him from our paddle program, and he's now in all the crew boats with everybody. And we just roll it out like that. So we're basing it on ability levels. It doesn't matter who you are, but your ability is what matters. And so that ability is as a coach, I'll work, my husband's the master's coach, so I'll say, Paulo's joining your group tonight, and he'll be in the Speed 3 group. And that's where Paulo goes tonight. So, and the Speed 3 group is Paulo's speed ability. So that's what we do as integration, and we're very lucky in our sport, again, and I would suggest that you go to your national and provincial levels and just, full integration is the way it works, and there's never been a question about that. We've been very lucky, though, to have that. I know that. So that's what we're doing in our sport, and we're doing it again based on speed groups. And even with when we have our segregated groups to start everybody, we start everybody, and then we decide where they're going to go, working with our coaches.
We do the same thing in terms of. First of all, we indoctrinate all our staff in our corporate culture. They call it the corporate culture brainwashing session. So I spend time with every one of my 200 employees and volunteers when they start in the organization, and we make sure they understand the attitude. And then they're not surprised when they're a swimming instructor and I say, by the way, in your class tonight, there's this child with special needs. Here's the manual on Sophie. And they surround yourself with people younger, smarter, and often better looking than you, and they solve these problems. They think ahead, they plan ahead. The climbing wall instructors say there's a child in your group that's in a wheelchair. They kind of go, okay. They do their lesson plan accordingly. And same with the coaches. I mean, anybody that expects a group of 8 people that you're coaching or teaching has the same level is wrong. They're all multi-level. It's always multi-level. And so this next generation is going to surprise you and thrill you because they take this in stride. I did not meet someone who was mentally challenged once in my entire school career. Now they're in the classroom with them. They've learned how to accommodate. There's a little guy in the lobby at Dover Court every day gets fed through a feeding tube. The kids take that in stride. They think, oh yeah, that's how Austin eats. So that you really can capitalize on, they're younger, smarter, and they're more nimble in their thinking than we are. Tell them what's coming and they'll solve it most of the time. If they come back to you and say, I can't figure out how to do this, then connect them with other people that are ahead of you in the game.
I'm not on the panel, but I'm with Wheelchair Basketball, and there's a bunch of different parasports, I'm sure here, that can help share some programming ideas about that reverse integration, because often we're the ones having to do that, whereas able-bodied sport, bringing in people with athletes with disabilities might not have that same challenge because they have that whole able-bodied population already, so siblings can just jump into their able-bodied counterparts or whatever, paddle in their race groups. So look around the room and find your parasport counterparts, and they'll often have great tools or resources or insights to share.
LA, John, Paul, and Stephanie, thank you so much for sharing, obviously, your time and your insight with everybody here this morning.
My name's Marcy Morris, and I'm the Executive Director of the Ottawa Sport Council, and I am so delighted to see everybody here today. About 6 or 8 months ago, Lisa Vexler and Emily approached me and said, you know what, we're thinking about having an accessible sport council, and what do you think? To which we said, well, what about inclusion? And why are we having 2 different sport councils, and why aren't we all the same? So the idea was born that, of course, we should be working together, and of course, we should have a sports summit that focused on inclusion. So I get to talk about what's next and kind of where we're going to go in this journey, and the pledge that the Ottawa Sport Council is going to make. So what some of you might not know is when we created the Ottawa Sport Council, we really wanted to create a way of giving back. We are not a charity, so to figure out how to become a charity and a foundation was really quite challenging, but very fortunately, working with Ottawa Community Foundation and the True Sport Foundation, we managed to set up our own foundation called the Ottawa Sport Council Foundation. So for all of you who donated today, thank you very much for your donations. They go to the Ottawa Sport Council Foundation, and every year we give away 2 grants to help improve inclusion in sport. Last year, we gave away the grant that somebody talked about for water polo to the Ottawa Titans, who created a program for children on the autism spectrum. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen the video, go to the Ottawa Titans website and watch their video. It's absolutely amazing. Our second grant was for a soccer club who said, we're very willing to waive all the registration fees, but the kids can't get here. So they actually, with our grant, created a transportation network to get kids who couldn't afford to play or afford to access the ability to get to the program so they could take part for free. So in June, we'll be opening the window again. It's all about inclusion in sport. So if you've got an idea, look on our website. You'll see the grants being announced, and we look forward to receiving a lot of great ideas on how we can help you. On that note, what I'd also like to do is turn things over to Emily and Marco, who have a great announcement about other stuff that's going to be going on in Ottawa.
So first, I just want to say I'm extremely grateful to be able to make this announcement in this venue. The reason today is so special is, one, we do have a number of the Ability Centre Ottawa board members and advisors in the room today. Secondly, it's because of all of you. So I am extremely fortunate to be able to share this news with so many people and so many organizations who have supported the initiative and the journey of the Ability Centre Ottawa from the very beginning. And then thirdly, the fact that Marco is here in town, came to our event after flying in from Saskatoon, back to Toronto, and then back to us, all within like 24 hours. So huge appreciation for that, that we can share this announcement together. So many of you know, and for those who don't, the idea of a fully inclusive and fully accessible facility that really focuses on recreation and sport, art, so culture, so art, music, drama and dance, life skill development, and research and innovation, and supporting those with and without disabilities, so all ages and all abilities. This has been a pretty long-term dream, and it has taken a number of volunteers to make this happen. And the volunteers with the Ability Centre Ottawa, we've actually been working on this initiative for over 7 years now. And today is a day where we get to announce that the Ability Centre Ottawa and Canadian Tire Jumpstart Charities are committed to a long-term partnership to support children and youth, regardless of ability, to engage in a life of sport and physical activity. So this initiative is actually part of an existing partnership between the Ability Centre Ottawa and the Ability Centre Durham. And this is following a prior announcement that was done in October when Canadian Tire Jumpstart Charities announced $1.7 million grant to the Ability Centre Durham. And of those funds, Ability Centre Ottawa will be receiving $100,000 annually for 5 years. So this grand total of $500,000 of Jumpstart funding will be supporting community initiatives such as the Parasport Education Days. So we were actually in a school all day yesterday promoting Parasport, and we will be in another school on Monday, so we are starting. We've actually started already. It will be supporting initiatives like today, bringing our community together, creating opportunities for education, creating opportunities for learning. And these programs and events will continue to grow between now and the time that we actually have a facility. So I'm just really fortunate to be able to present alongside Marco and to thank you. So on behalf of the Ability Centre Ottawa, our board, our advisors, but most importantly on behalf of all of the kids and youth who are going to be able to enjoy a journey through life and engage in sport and physical activity. So huge thank you. And the Jumpstart Play Finds a Way campaign, it's all about ensuring equal opportunity for kids. And the Ability Centre Ottawa is totally committed to making sure that no one is ever left out. So thank you.
I really, honestly, the thanks are not due to me. The thanks should go to all of you. When we started down the path of looking to an initiative that was going to be comprehensive, meaningful, and was going to generate impact, many of the stakeholder groups we met with, one of them in particular made a comment to our leadership team and said, just be sure you're not doing anything to us, you're doing something with us. And that has guided our view on this journey, and it will continue to guide our view on this journey. Your commitment to learning, that's our commitment to learning too. And it's only through partnerships with groups like the Ability Centre here in Ottawa, the Ability Centre in Whitby, the Paralympic Committee, the multitude of other partnerships that we have, that we're going to learn what the right thing to do is. And we may not always get it right, so I apologize for that. But you have our commitment that we will persevere and push and do what we can to leverage the assets that are at our disposal to make this change happen. And to come full circle, you want to ask me a reason why? I'll tell you a reason why. It's just like Stuart said, why not? And so I'll leave you with that. We're grateful for this relationship, and we're looking forward to helping kids in this community, as well as hundreds of thousands of kids across the country for as long as we can. So thank you.
I just can't wait to see what's going to come out of today, because you could feel the energy in the room. It truly was one of those moments, those defining moments, that I'm sure down the road we'll look back and say, that's where a lot of things were kickstarted, were launched, were refreshed, were reset. So very exciting stuff.
The first step is to really set a guiding star. Don't think about the barriers that are going to get in your way to start. Think about where you want to be. Set that long-term vision, and then find the natural partners who you need through collaboration, through purposeful disruption, who are going to help you overcome all those systematic barriers that would otherwise be in the way to achieving that long-term vision. We're not going to get it perfect, but we need to work together with lots of folks in the room at the same time, and maybe not some traditional partners if we're going to get to where we want to be.
I'm leaving inspired, absolutely inspired, and I have no doubt that this is going to lead to big things for the City of Ottawa and sport.